Miss Adams, we are streaming now.
Okay, so can we go ahead and get started?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, thank you so much. Welcome everyone to the Family Communications Committee. It is October 29th, 2020. My name is Stephanie Adams. I am a board member for New Hanover County Schools and also the chair of the Family Communications Committee. And I am very excited to see some familiar faces in this group as well as some new ones. So just to give you a little bit of background of the Family Communications Committee and its inception, it came together about a year and a half ago. And the purpose of the Family Communications Committee is to gain feedback from our community, from areas maybe that we don't always get to hear from. We have held 3 roundtable discussions prior to this. The roundtable discussions that we have hosted have been for families that are new to New Hanover County Schools, whether that was they were going into a new grade level, meaning elementary to middle, middle to high, completely new to our county. What we wanted to know from them was, what's been your experience transitioning to a new school or transitioning into a new county? How has the communication been? Have you been able to find what you need? So it was a really great discussion, and a lot came out of that discussion that changed some of the things on our website. We wanted to make things more accessible as people were looking at our school system. We've had a multi-language learners roundtable discussion. Predominantly, it was our Spanish-speaking families, and it was a great evening. We had about 30 families come out. All of our liaisons some information about Title IX. And so Jarrell Lewis, who is our director of Title IX, came and did a great presentation. And then about a week later, the world shut down. So the Family Communications Committee meets every other month. We are a group of New Hanover County employees, board members, and community members. So it's important that we have that parent voice. We have PTA voice on our board. Miss Bernice Sanders, who I see is here. We meet every other month to talk about some of the issues that we're seeing from a communication standpoint. And especially since the COVID has changed everything and communication has been incredibly important, we've been able to get some really good feedback about how can we best get to our families to find out what they need to know what's going on within the district or where they need to go. So one of those groups that we identified that really we wanted to make sure that they had a path to share their thoughts in their experience was our EC families, which brings us to tonight. And so we are going to, the structure of this evening is we're going to split up into a couple different groups, and the moderators for each group are going to ask some discussion. Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm on a live stream Zoom for New Hanover County Schools. Where are your shoes?
Ms. Belay, you are actually unmuted right now.
Quickly.
And if, so when we break out into our rooms, we're going to provide some discussion prompts. And we really want you to be honest and upfront. We want to know your experience. We want to know, you know, what are some of the situations that you've been in, and did you get the information you needed? Why or why not? All of the group leaders have the same discussion prompts. What we will do is we'll take your feedback from tonight and hopefully utilize it to fill in gaps and provide more improved service in areas maybe that we're missing. So we appreciate you all being here this evening. I would like to, I don't know how this is going to work because how the screen looks right now, but I do want to take a moment to acknowledge our board members that are on, as well as our members of the Family Communications Committee, and also the presenters that will be leading the groups. So Miss Jeanette Nichols is one of our board members. I don't know if I can see if she's on there. See Miss Nichols, give a wave. We also have Miss Judy Justice, one of our board members. Miss Justice, there she is. For our presenters, we have Julie Varnum, our Assistant Superintendent of Student Support Services. Hey there, Ms. Varnum. We are very excited to have Dr. Allison Jones, who has recently joined the district as our Director of Special Education and Related Services. Welcome. Kristen Jackson, our superstar Director of Student Support Services. I haven't seen her yet, and she's on here somewhere. And then Ann Gibson is our Chief Communications Officer for the school system. We have Ms. Caress Clegg, who is keeping us on point and going to be directing us through. She is our part of our communications and outreach team. Brandon Shope, who is our media relations specialist. I don't see him, but I believe he's there. Kate Taylor is one of our Family Communications Committee members, and she is also principal at Alderman Elementary, and she will be facilitating a group this evening. Dawn Brinton, our Assistant Superintendent of Technology. Dawn and I will be in one of the breakout groups together. Cynthia Boulay is one of our FCC members as well. She is a child nutrition manager. Remind me, Ms. Boulay, which school? I forget. Blair Elementary, that's right. And then Catherine Loeb is the school support associate at College Road Early Childhood Center. And Katie actually just joined the FCC, and Cynthia joined the FCC this year as well. So we're excited to have their voices added to the panel. So on that note, I am going to pass it over to Ms. Varnum to take it from there, to talk a little bit more about the structure and some of the discussion.
Hi, good evening. I'm glad to be here with you guys. I'm not sure that I can give a lot of detail about the structure of the evening, but I know I can give an overview of student support and special education programs. So I'll do that part, and then I'll listen for further direction from either Caress or Ann. But mainly, thank you guys for joining. First of all, within student support, we've really, a big part of our programming is special education, of course, and then also the other areas that Kristen Jackson supports with social emotional learning and other student supports such as school-based mental health, school health, and certainly a whole host of behavior supports and school counseling, school social work. So I know that we might have some areas that we want to discuss on those tonight, but mainly I think that I understand that the biggest part of our discussion will be surrounding students who receive special education services, and to share that it's synonymous to talk about special education and exceptional children's services. Just want to put that out there. One way to name it is through kind of national and international service delivery. It's known as special education, and kind of in a more formal way. In North Carolina, we talk about exceptional children's services, and so it's really one and the same. There's no differentiation, but I want to make sure that I put that out there. This is all about communication, so let me just put the nomenclature to rest. And then really talking about what we provide in special education services or to children within exceptional children's services is specially designed instruction. And that's what makes the service delivery disabilities so different than for other students who might also require accommodations or modifications that's not specially designed instruction. And so to give an idea, we follow IDEA, Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, which would be our national or federal regulations and federal model for service delivery for disabilities. And there are 14 disability areas, and they have very specific definitions of the disability, very specific criteria, characteristics, and then very specific evaluation procedures, and then eligibility components. So it's not a free-for-all. It's very driven by federal regulations, and then North Carolina policy lays out how North Carolina will have us identify those disabilities, move through evaluation procedures, and then find eligibility. One thing that I want to share about our special education services, well, first, I'm very excited that Dr. Jones is joining us. I'm very excited that Dr. Jones has joined our team. we feel very fortunate to have her as our special education director now. We stole her. It was an absolute robbery job. Stole her from UNC Wilmington from the Watson College, and I am an alum or alumni of the Watson College. And I'm not sure we really called it Watson College way back in those days, but that's where I got my undergrad degree in special education. And I'm also really excited to have Allison in this role because this role is very, very important to me. I served as the executive director for special education in this district for 6 years before moving into my current role. So, of course, I find this a match made. So thank you, Allison, for being my sidekick in this way. Regarding our services for special education, we serve every disability category in New Hanover County schools, and we also serve every disability category and all related services at every school. But that doesn't mean that every student can be appropriately served at every school. So many of our schools, I'll start with the high schools and move down. Our high schools serve every single need for their students. There might be a specialty program such as transition program for young adults that we just have one of in the district, and it's housed at Mosley. And that's for those students who are, I'll get a little bit technical. They're on the extended content standards, and they're going to be with us until they age out through the school year in which they turn 22, because we serve up through age 21. And there are some of our students that go into a magnet program for the whole district to get more community-based and vocational support as they prepare to transition into their adulthood and their employment or more vocational roles, either continuing their education or taking on jobs. But all of our high schools otherwise serve every area. They serve the most significantly impacted, and they serve the mildest of disabilities. Regarding our middle schools, we have a magnet approach to that, but every other middle school has every program. So for every two, you have every program served. So students don't have to go to a magnet that's 2 districts or 2 attendance zones away. It's much closer because of our larger population in middle schools. And then in elementary schools, the majority of students with disabilities, again, are served in their home school, but some students need one of what we call our maximum service programs, which would be like our intensive academic supports, intensive behavior supports. It could be intensive social communication supports, also specially designed academics. And so those are offered at regional sites, and generally, except for one exception, maybe, we only have one of those programs in each school. And so, for example, and I think our only principal on is Miss Taylor, right? I don't think we have another principal on, right? And Miss Taylor has intensive academic supports and intensive behavior supports at her school, and then serves every other resource and every related service need within her school. Even though it's a little bit of a smaller school, she serves pretty much all of the needs of her students with special ed services. So I know that when we move into the breakouts, we want to talk more about experiences that folks have had, and we want to talk about communications overall. There are many times where at the district level, we can create a protocol for how a policy is to be implemented, or kind of administrative procedures for tackling kind of a regulation need or regulation concern. And sometimes the translation of how that gets communicated down to the individual family level, sometimes that translation doesn't prove to be helpful at the family level. And while we can't at the district level create communications for the individual specific family level, we want to make sure that we recreate practices and tools to make sure that process is done well. So one of the areas that I know that I want to focus on in our breakouts and gain from the entire round table is, what is the experience at the individual student level, and not necessarily about individual student situations, but what are the patterns of concern that we might see where we need to build some better tools for our schools to be able to use, so that our families find communication to be much more meaningful, much more impactful in helping make further decisions, because it's a joint decision making effort between families and the school, especially when we're talking about students with special needs. That IEP team, that individualized education program team that supports every child with a disability, cannot be done without the collaboration of the school staff and the family, really identifying the unique strengths and needs of that individual student. Because when you know one student with a disability, that's what you know, one student with a disability. That's why they each have their own individualized plan. So I'm looking forward to the feedback that we get, and looking forward to taking all of the information from this collective group of folks, to really look at how we can build better practices, and also how we can celebrate practices that have worked well. So I think that's the most I want to share, and I will take direction from Ms. Clegg, Ms. Gibson, Ms. Adams, however you'd like for me to move forward.
All right, I will jump back in. We are going to break out into 4 different groups. For those of you that are at the BOE Center, your facilitators are going to be Ms. Ann Gibson and Brandon Shope. If you are in group 1, you are going to have Kate Talo and Jeanette Nichols. If you go into group 2, you will have Dawn Brinson and myself. If you are in group 3, you are going to have Cress Clegg, Cynthia Boulay, and Katie Loeb. As Julie mentioned, this is really a fact-finding opportunity for you to help us continue doing what we're doing well and to improve on the areas that we can do better. So please be open. I really appreciate you taking your Thursday evening to be with us. The information that you share truly will have impact and truly will be added into discussions as we move forward as a district. So Cress, how do you want to do this next? Are you sending them?
I am sending everyone into their breakout rooms now, so they should all be moving over.
And should we plan to be back at 7 or 7:05?
I think planning to be back at 7 would be great, yes.
Okay, great. So we have about 40 minutes to have these discussions. Are you both supposed to be in here? I mean, this is fabulous. I love it. You're muted.
I don't think this is right.
No.
I thought that I was supposed to be moderating a group, right?
So I don't have you as a moderator. So I thought that you and Dr. Jones were good. Oh, sorry.
No, you're good. You're good. I was cheering. Yeah, I'm not a moderator.
No, I think the communications team and family communications committee is going to help facilitate the questions, and we're taking the notes. And then you guys are here to help answer questions and help guide discussions. So if we go around, I guess as our group being, we're continuing to stream live, I guess. We should probably be aware of that. If we can just go around and introduce, I see that I think we've got a few non-New Hanover County folks in here. And so we'd love to meet you. So let's start, how about here, Charles Lamb, if I don't believe you're Charles Lamb.
No, this is not Charles Lamb. This is the much better of the two, I think. My name is Sean Lamb. I am the mother of an 8-year-old with Down syndrome. He goes to Blair. And yeah, I'm just here to join the family communications committee and, I don't know, provide feedback. This is great.
And I just would like to just make a note. Sean is also a member of our Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Committee, and she's been on it since the jump. So we really appreciate. She does a great job of being a voice for families with students with disabilities as we talk about equity in education. So glad to have you here tonight. Mary Alice.
And can I mention one thing about Sean? Also, Sean is on the Advisory Council for Exceptional Students, so she doesn't sell herself as well as she should.
She works
very involved parent.
with children. I mean,
Yep.
rock star.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, Mary Alice.
Yes, hi, good evening. I'm also the parent of an 8-year-old who is deaf and goes to Forest Hills, and she participates in the hearing and deaf program under Miss Mary Harker. And so we were asked to join. This will be my first time actually attending a meeting outside with children with special needs, but I definitely think during this period of time, it probably is very important to kind of participate and give some feedback. So we're happy to be here. My husband is also here too, so he might. I work online till 7 p.m., so we're kind of maybe going back and forth a little bit, but he'll also answer some questions as well. This is Tim.
Hello.
So yeah.
Welcome. And I think we have another. Do we have another joining? Is that Nancy Hoffer?
Yes, hi, it's Nancy Hoffer.
Hi, Nancy. What brings you here tonight?
My son goes to Eton. He's in the NHCS program there.
Great, thank you. And Katie, anything you would like to share as a family communications member before we get started?
Yes, I am also a parent. I have a child that just started with pre-K in public schools. So I just like to say I'm coming as an employee in New Hampshire County Schools, but also as a parent. So it's really fun to see both sides. And I'm really grateful that I accidentally got thrown into this breakout group. Really.
Us too. And just a side note, Mary Alice, actually my son goes to Forest Hills too. So we probably will, cross paths from time to time. So it's nice to see you on here.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. All right. So Dr. Jones, anything you would like to say before we jump into questions to set the stage?
No, I mean, I think I've had many conversations with our liaisons in the county. We have a really strong leadership team that, I'm so proud of the fact of the ways that we support principals and students in the county. And so, I'm just very grateful to be a part of this and anything I can do to support our kids.
Wonderful, thanks. And Ms. Brinson, anything you would like to share before we get started?
No, just don't talk too fast so I can take notes.
She will be serving as our note taker. All right, thank you. And Ms. Farnham, anything from you?
Yeah, I'm just happy to be here. Thank you guys.
All right.
And I'm really happy that I get to talk. Just don't let me talk too much. I get excited and I'll talk too much.
All right, so our first question, we've got two different breakdown areas, and one of them is school level communication and the other is district level communication. So we're going to start from the school perspective. Do you feel that your school effectively communicates with you regarding your child and concerns you may have? If so, in what ways? And if not, how could they improve? So do you feel that your school is effectively communicating with you regarding your child? It's a very general to get started.
So I can go first. Yes, I do. I feel like the teachers at Blair do a great job of, keeping me updated on some of the things that they're working on with Henry, even outside of the IEP process. I think that they do a great job for informal communication, just like if he has a rough day or needs additional support, pulling me in on that. I like how adaptable they are. Generally, things are via text or phone calls unless it's important. And then if it's important, it goes into email, which feels appropriate, right? That feels like the right process to handle. So I think that for the day-to-day stuff, they do a fantastic job. For the more strategic stuff, I feel like could be a little more, what's the word for it? Just, I don't want to say transparent, because I think that it's more of a function of everybody's very busy during IEP season. And so it's very hard to get like drafts to parents and stuff like that. But just more like, I don't know if setting expectations is the right word for it, but like coming in and knowing more what to expect and what their asks are going to be, and kind of helping them understand what your asks are going to be even prior to the meeting. So you have that opportunity to get aligned before the actual like meeting itself, which is pretty brief.
So something like would like maybe in a form of a document that here's some of the high points that the IEP team is going to touch on. Here's some of the issues you want to touch on.
Yeah, and I think generally, yeah, the invitations are meant to do that, because the invitations will say, hey, we're going to talk about present levels, or we're going to talk about, you know, yearly review, or if we're going to talk about designing your evaluation, do that from a high level. But I think, you know, and maybe I'm just like looking for more information. I think parents would feel a little less blindsided. And I don't mean to say that Blair has ever blindsided me, although I have been blindsided at other IEPs. But I think that if you help set expectations, parents can, one, prepare a little more, and two, feel a little less like surprised, right? And because it's that surprise that gets like emotions into play, and that puts people in a situation where they walk away feeling dissatisfied. And again, I don't want to necessarily say that I see that at Blair, but that is just, I think there's some lack of transparency, and I kind of understand why, but that drives a lot of like some of the friction that you can feel after you leave the meeting.
Thank you. Appreciate that feedback. How about from either Mary Alice and Tim or Nancy, your thoughts on this question? Do you feel your school effectively communicates with you?
Is that for me, Nancy?
Yes.
Okay.
Your turn.
Okay. Well, my son just moved from a self-contained classroom into fourth grade gen ed with pullouts. So I feel like we were in one program, and now we're kind of in a little bit of a different program. So I'm still getting acclimated to that. But yes, I do think it's Eaton, just as a reminder. I think the community, I can echo what was said. So the communications from the teachers are are great. Like the fact that they will email me and sometimes text and that sort of thing. And they are keeping me involved, informed, especially because he's only been in this different environment for about a week now. The only thing I would say is sometimes I'm from like administrative point of view, I think that sometimes there's as far as the para educator support, we love our paras and we really, really value them. But it's not always clear for me when the new school year starts, like sometimes there's fewer paras than before, and that makes a huge difference. And I mean, I know the teachers really need them and the students really need them. And it's sometimes I have to rely a little bit on gossip from other parents, like, you know, are we going to be fully staffed or not? That kind of a thing. So that's really the only question I've had. Otherwise, you know, school's very responsive to us, and my son has made really great progress there, and I give the school most of the credit for that. And
Great.
his teaching.
Great to hear. Thank you. Anything from Mary Alice or Tim?
Yeah, sure. So Isabel's been to 3 different schools before we settled into Forest Hills, all within New Hanover, and a lot of it had to do with them putting her in school systems that were far outside of where we lived, and the time to get there. So I've had a lot of different experiences. So, but most recently, since she's gone to, this will be her second year at Forest Hills, and she's actually in the deaf and hearing program, I have little to no concern with my communication. I feel that the program director and her parent in that program are beyond, like, above and beyond excellent on communication. In fact, I was texting with her before this meeting. So that's been great. I think the only place where I've ever had a struggle with communication, which and I still have this issue. It's better now because my child is remote, so I actually see the speech working, and so I have a communication now with the speech teacher. But I've had some issues in the past with the turnover of speech therapists, and so that was a little unnerving. Is that there were so many different ones. I've had speech delayed on being get it done to the IEP because there wasn't a speech therapist and having to do makeup sessions, as well as having no idea what the speech therapist is even doing with my child because they weren't sending home any like log.
We lost her. All right. We will, hopefully that will reboot. And we'll come on back. That was good. That was a good dialogue. Let's go ahead and just move forward, and then we'll see if they can come back into this conversation. So this is a general question that we have asked pretty much across the board in all the family communications committee meetings of all of our groups. As a parent, what is your preferred method of communication? Meaning, are you a phone person? Do you like wait for that Connect 5 call? Do you want to see an email from your school? Do you want to text? What is your just preferred communication for general information coming directly from your school?
Probably for me, email, just so I can look back at it when I need to and remember what it said.
That is fair. All right, so email. What about you, Nancy? When it's just general updates from the system, what is your preference of how your school is communicating with you?
Yeah, I would have to say email as well. There's so much information and you're deluged, and having a record of it to be able to look back is really more effective for me than like a text would be.
Yep.
And a call, forget it.
That's not getting a pickup, huh? All right. So we want to talk about COVID because it's dominated our lives since March. And so put your COVID hat on here for a moment. Do you feel that communication with your child's school during COVID has been adequate? And this is including back in the spring and where we are now with the communication that's coming out of the schools. If not, if you don't think that the communication has been adequate, what are some suggestions you think that we could do to improve to get information to you?
I can go. My experience was great. I think that given the uncertainty of the situation, the teachers and the staff were very on top of things, and the liaison was able to help support getting the temporary learning plan out right away when it was just not safe to do in-person instruction. So I think they did a great job. There was a lot of information coming at me, and that wasn't necessarily bad. I think that they were understanding of families that had people that work full time and could maybe not get all the information right away back to them. And so as long as we engaged and tried, that was accounted for. So I had a very good experience.
That's great. That's good to know. How about you, Nancy? How has your COVID experience been from a communication standpoint?
I think it was fine. I mean, obviously the guidances and the decisions it's such an evolving process. I will say that since Eaton is a year-round school, we would have a break and kind of know information during the break, which and not knowing, but I mean, everyone I think did a good job. And I mean, I'm not trying to be critical at all. It was really an evolving process. So I would say it was positive for me.
That's fantastic. I think in these times, especially, our anxiety levels continue to rise, and it's easy to find everything that's wrong. And sometimes we have to work a little harder to identify what did we do really well. And there were some really good high points in here. So I really appreciate that you're able to say this has been a fairly positive experience. And I'm glad that you feel that you've been getting what you need to help your child be successful during these extremely challenging times. So that's good to hear. When you initiate contact with your school specifically, how do you do it? Is it email based? Are you calling directly? Sean, you mentioned you're texting with your teacher tonight. Or no, Mary Alice, I think, said that. How are you interacting most frequently with either your child's IEP teachers or the school as a whole?
For me, I'm emailing.
Okay. Do you feel when you email that you are getting responses in a timely fashion? What's the turnaround on that?
Yeah, it's a good turnaround time. No,
Okay.
Yeah, no problems there.
Great. Sean, how about you?
Usually, like for the day-to-day stuff, the informal stuff, it's usually just texting or phone calls. But anything that I think should be on the record, it's all through email, and the response time is great. It's within a day, probably. It's pretty solid.
It's great to hear. Awesome. All right, we're going to move into some district level communications. We are rolling through since it's just the two of you on here, which is great. And Katie, if you've got any, I don't know if you've got any comments about this as a parent, just your general communication, how has that been for you? Please jump in and you can share because you're a parent as well.
Yeah, I think that I like to say I'm lucky enough that I work in the same building that my son attends right now. And so obviously the communication is pretty easy. But one thing that I feel like I'm lacking just due to COVID is that that personal connection with my son's teachers, which is kind of weird since they're down the hall from me and it's not their fault. It's just the lack of being involved in the classroom and being able to go into, I don't go in his classroom at all because I'm in the office, so we have to social distance and everything. So I would be interested to hear if some people with special needs children were feeling the same way, if they don't feel as close to those teachers, and if that's creating a barrier or a boundary even with communication.
That's a great question. Do you guys want to talk about that? Speak to that. How have you felt about the relationship building with your teachers in the time of COVID? Great question, Katie.
My situation's a little bit different because my son went from the self-contained into the 4th grade, but it's really been pretty seamless. We had a really long IEP meeting and it was well attended, and I've had a lot of communication with his different paras and with the different teachers. And so not having sort of the welcome to school night here, visit your classroom, that was a bit of a loss because, they go to class, he went to school the first day and was, where's my class going to be? But, that was easily sorted. But otherwise, my experience has been that he's adapted and hasn't had any difficulty with bonding.
How about you, Sean?
It's been pretty good. I think there's the relationship between Henry's special education teacher hasn't missed a beat because he knows her very well, and we already have that, right? We've known her for 2 years. Jenna teacher, I would say, last year I was one of the room moms, and so I could go in for parties and stuff like that. And of course, you kind of miss that ability to meet and interact with them. But I do think that she's making an effort to do that to me, because like she'll see me in the pickup line and she'll just say, "Oh, Henry really worked hard for me today," or what, whatever. And so I think that like she's trying. So I think there's just some natural challenges, just for lack of access, that happens due to the safety concerns that obviously the staff wants to stay safe. But I think that they're doing their best.
All right, so let's go ahead and let's talk about the district level communications. This evening, you may or may not have seen Ann Gibson, who's our Chief Information Officer, and they've restructured our communications department, and they're really trying to reach our families in a lot of different ways, more so than we've ever done before. And so I'm interested to know from your perspective, how much of that are you utilizing, I guess, is the question. So the first question is, do you follow the district's social media accounts for information regarding New Hanover County schools, whether it's EC related issues or just New Hanover County schools related issues? And if so, which ones do you follow?
I follow just the Facebook account, not really Twitter. I'm not a Twitter person really, but I follow the Facebook account, and every so often I'll go into the website and check out like the Board of Education, like agenda meetings, just so I kind of know what discussion, but I'm pretty tuned in as well, just due to my participation on the equity committee.
So if you are doing social media, you're doing Facebook.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. How about you, Nancy?
Yeah, I'm really not tuned in. Facebook, I get the updates, but this meeting is a new experience for me, and this, committee, and so I'm not tuned in, but I do get updates on Facebook, and then I know we get emails, and then like the 855 auto calls, and I actually appreciate those.
Yeah. I'm glad you said that, because as the committee chair, like we did put it out, we needed to recruit for some new members this year. We lost a few just through attrition, for various reasons over the course of last year. And I'm wondering if we did our due diligence to get to the community for new members. We had a smaller, I think we probably had, 12 to 15 people apply, and a lot of them were New Hanover County Schools employees that are also parents. So I'm curious, how do we did, a press release went out. I think it was on our social media channels. But I guess my question is, how do we get to more families that would want to be part of something like this a little bit more regularly to have that voice? So that's good. Katie, how about you? What social media channels do you follow for New Hanover County Schools info?
I follow Facebook and Twitter. They do both get lost in my feed a lot. I found, like, if I'm just scrolling, I don't happen to come across New Hanover County Schools, I have to go look for it. But those are the two that I follow.
Well, I will let y'all know we have an Instagram account that is also sharing a lot of information. And we also, I encourage you to check out the YouTube channel. So like, for instance, this meeting, after we're done tonight, it's going to be posted to our YouTube channel. And so any of the meetings that are public meetings, you can go back and you can watch just for informational purposes. It used to be just board meetings were recorded and able to be replayed. But in the time of COVID, we've had so many Zoom opportunities that you can actually go back and pretty much watch any of our board level committee meetings at this point, as well as town halls that went on for COVID earlier in the year. So the YouTube channel is NHCS TV, I think, is the YouTube call. So that's a really good one to check out as well. In what instances do you feel that you should receive district level communication? What are the scenarios that you feel you need to hear from the district versus hearing from the school?
I can speak to it a little bit. Mainly, I think everything's best to resolve things at the lowest level possible. So I think mainly you want your communications to be with the teacher in the school. For district level communications, I think that it's good if there's an escalation path. If there are any concerns, that's what like I used as an escalation path the first year I was in the school district. That can be helpful. I think that it also can be helpful. I felt, and I gave Nelson this feedback during the redistricting conversation. I felt like a lot of the redistricting conversation wasn't necessarily relevant to me. And I didn't really have the ability to provide feedback because I was like, well, I'm at Porter's Neck now. I'll probably be at Blair, but I didn't know if the program was going to move to Blair. So like, how do I give meaningful feedback on where I care to be if I don't even know where the program is going to be? And Patty did try to help with that. But that could be helpful for parents that are just like trying to feel their way around what a district level change would mean for the exceptional children's program. There was a lot of just like kind of uncertainty around that. And then, you know, just anytime there's like safety stuff going on, you know, with kids with special needs, that can be very scary. And so just maybe an additional like pulse of those families or communication somehow could be a little more reassuring if it was proactive rather than like, you know, scared parents reaching out. So I think that those are like the situations where I would want district involvement.
I throw it back to when Henry was first starting in the school system. I know it's been a couple years now. What was that experience like for you to get the information that you needed in order to figure out who to contact? And like, how did you start? Obviously, you've been in this for a couple of years now. And so you're very well versed and you're very tuned in. How was it as a first time parent coming into the system?
I heard, and I believe it's accurate, that it's very difficult at every change in school. So the first time Henry was in kindergarten, that was a very difficult year. And I expect it will be difficult the first time he goes in middle school and high school. So that, I think, you know, kind of knowing that will be challenging, and just knowing like why it will be challenging because they don't know your son yet. They don't, you know. So I think that communication could be stepped up during those transitions to have parents feel better supported, and students feel better supported as well. I think that the early education team did a great job. Like the 3 to 5 team did a fantastic job. Just kind of, part of it was the culture of the school was very welcoming. And I felt very taken care of. So I think that was an easy transition. The harder one was certainly kindergarten. I felt like it was a lot of expectation setting that wasn't exactly welcoming to families. And that was a very challenging time.
Thank you. Nancy, how about you? I know that was a lot. The question was, what are the circumstances that you feel the district should be initiating communication? And then also that tag-on question that we just had, when you initially entered the system, how easy was it for you to find the communication that you needed to build the relationships with those that were involved?
As far as communication from the district, I agree, anything safety related. But I do identify, I'm just identify closely with his school in particular. So, and just, I don't want to receive superfluous information that, like she said, doesn't really apply. So, so just, I don't know. This is the first time I'm really thinking about that. So, and our route was somewhat different coming in. We were moving internationally, and our son had just been diagnosed at 3. So we came over and we spoke to Teach and to Oasis, but we initially met with Heather Radiff and I forget the gentleman's name, and we had a great introduction, and Sal ended up at the CDC, and that was it's a wonderful place, and we still support them. But our introduction was good. They were really responsive. It was awkward because we had traveled and we were traveling back, and we were nervous, and it was all new, but they were really very helpful, and it was as smooth as it could have been, I think.
Great. Do you feel that the district effectively communicates with families of students with disabilities? And if not, what suggestions would you make for improvements? So this is at the district level now.
So I think that's a complicated question. I think that the district has always been very responsive for anything, and schools have always been very responsive. Whether or not I liked the answer was a different question, right? So some of that might, I don't know, it's very hard maybe before you've built the relationship too, to like, you don't have that trust and everything. But I do think that some of that may, like, if a parent isn't going to like the answer, which is very common, especially when something's been elevated to the district level, I think a lot of the thing that can help that along is, explaining why. And I also think that I got the perception that the alignment with the school was more important than resolution of the issues sometimes. And I understand why that has to be, but I think that when I don't even feel like we're in problem solving mode, it can be discouraging. And so I think that that has changed over the years as we've established more of a relationship with myself and with my son. But I think at the beginning, that was my perception, was that there was this escalation path, but it wouldn't really help solve the problem. And again, that may be because I just didn't like the answer too. So that's kind of a complicated question.
Well, you answered it beautifully, complicated or not.
Yeah.
Nancy, how about you? Do you feel that the district effectively communicates with families of students with disabilities? And if not, what could we do better? Or how could we do better?
I don't really feel like I can adequately respond.
Okay.
Yeah, I just don't know at this point.
Well, let me ask you this one then. Before tonight, because you said this is one of the first times you've participated in something like this, and again, I thank you, for being here tonight. Were you familiar with the district's special education staff? Did you know Ms. Varnum? Did you know Dr. Jones had joined us? Have you seen them before, or were you familiar with their names?
Very peripherally.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what would be some suggestions on how to increase their visibility and accessibility? What would you like to see?
I think when they send information home in the school binder, I think that's effective. I always look at that, and then I can, save it in the folder, and I can refer to it. So I think that's, it's basic, but it's effective. Low tech.
Yep.
And maybe under normal circumstances, non-COVID, having an informal meeting, an informal sort of a gathering would be very nice, where, there's no expectation that it's just an easy way to get together and put a face to a name, but it's not a meeting per se. That would be nice, when it's able to take place again, something like that. I'm not even sure what the mission is. I'm just really getting on board.
Right.
A little belatedly, but.
That's all right. I love the idea of just a casual meet and greet that gets you the opportunity to see faces, because so often, when it gets to the district level, there's a situation that needs to be at hand. And if you had met that person before, some people may be more inclined to reach out with additional questions, whereas before they may be nervous about that. But we've got amazing staff at our schools. We have amazing staff at central office. And so I think that sometimes names on a official letter can seem a little bit intimidating, but if you get to talk to them face to face, they're just wonderful people that are here to help. And I think that's what comes through versus over a letter. So I think that's a really cool idea. And it will be wonderful. We can do it after COVID.
Yeah, and I totally agree with it can be intimidating and that sort of thing, but also having a child with special needs, you're sometimes you're fighting sort of a lot of battles, and you can lose some perspective, like, do I need to escalate this, or is this just me having in my little world having my own issue? And if you do have sort of a connection with someone, you can even bounce it off them without sort of making a big deal of it.
Yep.
So
that's great. Yeah, to be able to reflect rather than feel like you're having to do a formal email or something. Yeah.
Exactly.
Sean, how about you? Were you familiar with the special education staff prior to this evening?
Yes, definitely. No, Julie's been so helpful. I mean, she's always been willing. Before, in her previous role that Dr. Jones has now, she was always super willing to meet with me and my family. I felt like she knew us by name very early on. So yes, I definitely knew them before. I think that I think when we had to escalate first, we just looked on the website to get the contact information. I do think our liaison would have been happy to provide that if we would have asked her as well. So I felt like I had several avenues to do that escalation.
So what I'm hearing there is maybe for families that are new to the district, maybe that information provided may be helpful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I don't know what that. So, Katie, anything you want to share before we go back into the breakout rooms?
I think that I have 36 seconds.
Where do I go to answer that question?
Are you on an iPad, Gina?
I am.
Okay, if you click all the way to the top, a drop-down bar should happen. Top right-hand side, 3 dots that say more. Click it, and it should say chat.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, welcome back. We have everyone, Miss Clegg. I'm sorry, I wasn't looking. Did you say yes? Yes, okay. All right. I hope you have all had fantastic conversations. I appreciate the dialogue that we had in our group, and I'm looking forward to hearing just some general themes or some reflections from some of the other groups that have spoken. Maybe just some general findings that maybe you have come to or suggestions that you shared. And so if you would like to share something, either if you're one of the leads or scribes for the group, if you would like to share some of the themes that came out of your discussion, that would be really helpful. Who wants to start us off?
Get us started.
Thank you, Ms. Taylor.
Sure. So we had a great group. It was a diverse group of parents who have elementary, middle, and high school students, 504s and IEPs, a variety of disabilities. So it was well represented. I think there were a lot of themes sort of throughout our conversation. One being that they feel like that the communication from the school level in typical times is strong, and that in the midst of COVID has been, I heard several times, as good as it could be. The perception being that at the school level, they perhaps principals, teachers may not have all of the information. And so the district communication being very important. Everyone in my group said you cannot communicate enough. That information is, empowering and gives families the ability to make those decisions. One of the important points that I thought was made, we talked about how, and it's probably a personality thing, but it was interesting for me to hear parents say, even if the information is going to change, tell me what you know while you know it. And I think it perhaps makes them feel a part of the process. I'm certain there are some parents who would disagree with that and would say, just make up your mind and tell me what it is going to be. So that may not be universal. I must say, though, a lot of wanting more transparency from the district level, clear communication, response at the district level to parents who initiate communication, wanting a response, of some kind, and a timely response would be preferable. Although it is important for me to note that Julie Varnum and Dr. Allison Jones both got shout outs in my group for being responsive and helpful in situations. So that was good. I certainly wanted to share that. Written communication is a preference. So having the ability to go back and refer to it at a later time. And I believe that was both at the school level and at the district level. And so at the school level, things like the Remind text app, or, different schools use different programs for that purpose, but even emails, which this was helpful to me, even when the information is not for the school as a whole, but is specific to their child, that written communication was the preference, at least among the members of my group. So I think perhaps they like being able to read and respond if that's the way the communication works in writing. But I think those emails perhaps at the district level that come with the Connect 5 call, are helpful to those families. And then one thing that I will end with that I thought was an interesting idea is the notion that, information that comes for the school or from the district most often is targeted to general education students. Not that it doesn't include special education or students with disabilities, but a desire perhaps to see a newsletter at a district level that is specific to families with students with disabilities, and that it could both be informative, but also highlight some of the opportunities, extracurricular enrichment, as well as some of the cool projects and things that our students with disabilities are involved in at the school level. One example was, a group of, I believe it was NHCS children who made blankets for animals in Australia, in the wildfires. And so being able to really highlight that, and the timeline for that, they were open, whether it was even, monthly or bi-monthly, something like that. But I thought that was a good idea, worth sharing as well. Very good conversation.
Great idea. Thank you for sharing that. I see Dr. Jones taking notes furiously up there in the corner. So, all right. So we've got a face-to-face group, and then we've got group 2 and group 3. Who would like to go next?
I'll go ahead and go next.
Thank you, Dawn.
Okay, so we had a small group, nice little cozy group, but we got lots of information. So a lot of what Kate said is actually repeated in our group, and we had elementary parents. it was interesting because our parents said at the school level, just the informal information, they actually preferred the text messages, the quick little phone calls, just kind of the day-to-day, how the kid's doing. But when it came to formal stuff, they do prefer the emails. So that way it's in writing and they can refer back to. And I believe that was both at the school level and at the district level. They felt that, especially in the situation we are now, that teachers are doing a great job of doing the best they can to help their students and reaching out and communicating and making sure that they're aware of what's going on. A recommendation, a couple of recommendations that I thought were interesting. One is when we can, the recommendation came up about doing kind of like a meet and greet where you could have like the central office level positions, your liaisons and your administrators, where families are able to kind of just drop in and informally meet people, put names with faces. So the first time they're meeting people at central office isn't in a negative light or in a kind of formal setting where people might be intimidated, because the process, just especially when you're a new parent with a student coming into the school system with special needs, that whole process can be very intimidating. And so they felt like if we could do some kind of meet and greet kind of thing, that might kind of help kind of ease in and make people feel more comfortable when they're starting to get letters and trying to kind of work their way through the system. A thing that I think we could do that came up is probably work on our processes, making sure that parents understand that these are the procedures in any given situation, and also explaining the why behind sometimes that we do things in certain ways. These are our procedures because this, that, and the other. And it very well, most of the times, I'm sure, when it comes to special education and students with special needs, it's a legal issue and it's, the law, but maybe even citing what law that is. And that way you've got some parents who might be interested in kind of learning more and then being up and educating themselves. The other issue, or the other thing that came up, they said, coming in kindergarten is a rough time, but then the building changes, which makes sense. 6th grade, 9th grade, they hear that those are your challenging times. So if there's anything that we can do during those transition periods to help those parents navigate that change, because we all know when you go from elementary, elementary teachers are very nurturing. They really help the students. You get to middle school, it's a little less. You go to high school, it's a little less. So anything that we can do as a district to help bridge that gap, especially with that communication, so that way the student is comfortable making that transition and the parents are comfortable making that transition, would help parents out.
Thank you, Donna, I appreciate it. All right, face-to-face group or group 3?
We're the face-to-face group at the BOE Center, and we did also hear many of the same themes.
This is our group 3 group.
Can you hear me? Are you able to hear me?
Anne is muted. If she's speaking right now, we can't hear her.
Can you hear me?
Barely. I can see you holding the mic. So I know you're talking.
Should I come over there? Okay.
There you go.
Can you hear
That'll
me?
probably open it up.
Okay, great.
Yep.
Sorry about that. I was just saying that we did have a lot of the same themes mentioned that were mentioned in the other groups. The notion that the communication was stronger prior to COVID, that COVID has presented additional challenges. But some of the points that the group made, more advance notice, and that idea that keeping the information coming, knowing and acknowledging, they're fully acknowledging that it continues to change, but still to keep that coming with as much advance notice as possible. In addition to just explaining what's happening, the why behind it is important, and letting parents know reasons behind decisions and letting them know their avenues to continue the discussion and seek answers for their children beyond an initial IEP meeting or an initial discussion about a decision that's being made. We were talking about, as was mentioned in the other groups, that transition between schools. So transitioning students into middle school is difficult already and even more complicated with all the circumstances this year. So special attention to those students that are having to go through that transition. We talked about, as was mentioned in the other groups, integrating more communication for special education students and their families. And what was discussed in our group was really integrating that communication into the general education communication as opposed to a separate newsletter. So looking at both of those strategies. And a good suggestion that came out of the group is using the parents that we have participating tonight and other special education families to vet our communication so they can look at it and identify what issues might be potential roadblocks for families before it's sent out and give the district that feedback. And also that idea of that meet and greet that was mentioned in the last, that idea that families want to have those discussions and be able to ask questions in small group settings with district staff and hear answers to their questions, ample time to get that feedback.
And I hate to do this to you, but we missed like the first 2 minutes of that. Is there any way that you could go back just to the beginning? Because it sounds like there was a lot of really good information, and I don't want us to miss it.
I'm sorry, I'm not sure what you didn't hear, but I started out talking about that same that was mentioned in other groups, that prior to COVID, the communication was very strong, and that parents want to continue having that faith in that relationship, but there's been a great deal of challenge with the added situations that COVID has presented. And I will say also that a lot of parents have found that the clearest avenue right now for that communication is just finding that one-on-one contact. Some have gotten creative in terms of a Google Doc or texting with a teacher, with a certain individual, and they get more response and responsiveness that way. But they don't really feel that it should be on them to develop those communication channels, that they would like to see that come from the district.
Great, thank you very much. All right, last but not least, group 3, which was Correct and Cynthia, I believe. Katie, we stole Katie for our group by accident. I don't know how that happened, but we were grateful to have her.
We heard a lot of what everyone else was hearing. Great school level communication from our schools. So kudos to schools for continuing that communication and getting that out there. There did seem to be a lack of communication when it came to the transition piece. So whether students were transitioning from elementary school to middle school or middle school to high school, just whether it's from a loss of a caseworker or a case manager, or just looking at ways we can improve that communication with parents. We did have some parents who they started middle school this year, and so that transition was very hard from them, not knowing who to contact or not having anyone contact them on what was going on in the district, especially in times of COVID. Email was listed as the preferred contact for everyone for the majority part, but we did have some non-traditional parents who still preferred that personal contact and that personal interaction that comes through with a phone call. We had a couple shout outs for schools at CREC, Mary C. Williams, and Carolina Beach Elementary that have done wonderful jobs as far as communicating and getting out to schools. Let's see. There was an issue that parents thought was a bit of a concern for them when they would reach out either for the school level, district level, or even the board level, and then they wouldn't hear back. So then they would take their communications to the media, WECT or WWAY, and that was the only way they felt they were able to kind of get communication started or get information, was going that route. Another big suggestion that we heard was communicating from one source or one main input instead of putting different information out on social media or through emails, having one central location where we do offer communication where parents know that they can go to and get that, get what they're looking for.
So really great ideas were shared in this evening, and truly for those of you that are participating, I know in our group we talked about it that some of y'all have never been part of something like this before, and I've seen a lot of people saying that they really feel like they've had a voice, and we appreciate your engagement in being part of this, because we couldn't do this without your feedback, and it's important. Since we do have Dr. Jones and Julie on, are there any just comments from some of the themes that you're hearing, or any thoughts that you would like to share based on some of the feedback we've collected this evening?
Yeah, I'll jump in and share. I don't know how helpful it is still, but we had a similar parent forum just for students, just for families of students with disabilities, probably about 3 or 4 years ago, and ended up revamping our special education webpage in response. And one of the things we included on there was something that was discussed in our group by one of our members, was really seeing that escalation chart, or who do I contact if. And we had a chart on there, and I think it might be something worth us revisiting. So maybe that's something Dr. Jones and I can work on together, but revisiting that. But like, if you're having problems with your child's schedule or this or that, you know, who do you go to? And at what point does it really kind of warrant the district level? And then I think, you know, I love the idea. Somebody mentioned like a newsletter for parents, just about events or even regulation changes or protocol changes, any kind of thing like that. But also a constant reminder of who the liaison is for your school. So that's your immediate contact if you haven't been able to resolve things right at the school level. Because, you know, the closer to the issue that you try to resolve something, the more likely you're going to have good communication, and you're not going to waste time in trying to clarify and give a lot more information. So I think in re-looking at that, some of the ideas, I've written down several things, and I know that Allison has done the same. But then I also wanted to ask, we started a couple of years ago a parent email listserv. Is anybody on that? Do any of you have access to that? So I think we might want to work closely with our communications team on trying to get those accesses. We had that for a while in when we provided feedback or asked for feedback on IEP meetings, like rate the IEP meeting, how well you understood it, how well you felt like your input mattered, that kind of thing. And at the bottom, let us know if you want to be added to our email listserv. And so we got a few, but we have about 3,400 students with IEPs in our district. And yeah, I think so too, Sean. But you know, we don't have that many emails. And so Sean's our superstar parent. She's going to grab onto everything. And so that might be something we want to push back out, really, since we heard a lot about written communication is the best. So you can go back, you have a source document you can reference, and email works. I think maybe having a district-wide email listserv would be good. And so, yes, parent education sessions, you know, having not just a meet and greet, but parent education sessions. And we have had those prior. And I think maybe sometimes the maybe announcing those hasn't gone as far. We haven't always had good turnout, but our transition fairs were always a really good turnout, where we had parent education sessions, and we would have 400 and 500 people. And this year, which would have actually been this week, we haven't been able to do that. So I'm excited about this information. Dr. Jones, is there anything else you want to add?
No, I mean, not necessarily. I actually want to thank the parents that were here this evening. I mean, it was really helpful information, and like, you know, Julie said, I was taking a lot of, or Stephanie said I was taking a lot of notes. So it warms my heart to know what we're doing well and where we can improve. And so parents are at the core of what we are doing, especially during these really tough times. So I just want to thank everybody for your flexibility and working with us, because we are working hard and doing the best we can.
Absolutely. Thank you for the feedback, everyone. Thank you. And look forward to see some results from that.
We're just about out of time. If there are any, we have a couple minutes. Do we want to open for questions? Just one or two if there's time, if anyone has any. Anyone have any burning questions that they would like to share, since we have a few more minutes?
I had one quick question based on some of what Julie was talking about at the beginning. And you mentioned kind of how schools fall out from elementary school programs and then the middle school and high school programs. You mentioned for middle school, I think specifically the concept of magnets, and I wondered what that was. I'm not very familiar with that term. So is that like a program, or like, I guess what I'm asking is generally, should I expect Henry to go to the school he's districted for middle school?
So thank you, Sean. That's a great question. So all of our schools that don't have every program end up having a magnet. So they end up pulling from a couple of other attendance zones. And so for middle schools, though, the way it kind of works is middle schools have they have all programs except for middle schools don't have both specially designed academics, which we call SDA, and ISCS, which is the intensive social communication program. They don't have both of those. So every middle school has intensive academic supports and intensive behavior supports. Slight caveat difference with Williston, but every school does have the resource and the intensive academic supports. And then every other middle school they either have the SGA program, specially designed academics, or the intensive social communication supports. So that means that every other school has every two has every program, because the middle schools have everything except for one. And that's that most maximum service program. So we can cluster those and have a more robust program with a team of teachers, and then a more of a heterogeneous group of kids that belong to that program.
Okay.
Does that help? Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you. Yep.
And we have a grid on our webpage on our special education site that has all of the programs by school. And there's also a grid on there for all the liaisons for which schools. So if anybody has any questions, feel free to peruse that site, give feedback to us also on how we might be able to make that more user-friendly. We try to put a lot of information out there, but know that every time you put more information out there, it's another click. And sometimes after you hit 5 or 6 clicks, you're kind of done clicking. And so we want to make sure that it's user-friendly as well.
I think we have one question in the BOE Center.
Yes, I have 2 questions. The first one is, I was wondering why special needs children could go to school every day, and then it changed to they're remote on Wednesdays. And then additionally, a form was sent out saying that we agree that our children are receiving the accommodations remotely. I have not signed that one yet, but there's no what are the other options? I don't agree that they're getting the services that they need remotely.
So I'll respond to that. I'm not sure what form that was that asks if there's acknowledgement on getting the accommodations remotely. It sounds like that might be a school-specific form. And if you want to send that over to me or to Dr. Jones, we'll take a peek at that.
Sure.
The other, to answer your question, when the district was initially planning for Plan B to be a 1 week on, 2 weeks off, that would have been that students would be in the building 5 days a week. And so it would be like a group 1 would be Monday through Friday, while group 2 and 3 would be remote. And then it would rotate through so that every group had their week. And we decided at that time that students with disabilities, we wanted all students with disabilities to attend all of those days so that they had access to their special education service delivery, no matter how minimal or how significant by time frame, even if it was 60 minutes a day, 60 minutes a week versus, full-time special education. And then when Plan B changed for the district to be an AABB model with a remote day in the middle, it was determined that students with disabilities, really the only way we can provide their least restrictive environment is to make sure that they also have that along with typically developing peers so that they can access their general education curriculum in a face-to-face manner. And there wouldn't be that option on Wednesdays because all general education curriculum was going to be remote. And so it was determined that they would follow that same Wednesday remote so that they would have the same access to curriculum that their typical peers do, but that they would be able to have all of the face-to-face days. So originally it was, we want students with disabilities to have every face-to-face day, which meant it would be Monday through Friday. In the plan that became what the district determined and the board determined to be AA remote BB, it was still, we want students with disabilities to have every face-to-face day. It just meant there was one less face-to-face day in the week.
Right. So if I'm hearing you correctly, that's so that the special education students could be included with the other students?
It was mainly to make sure that they had the same service delivery of their general curriculum. Yes. And that would not be face-to-face. And so really that would be students with disabilities together in a face-to-face without their typically developing peers. And that would not necessarily match their IEP service delivery. And so it was determined that we really wanted to match their IEP service delivery and have that include, just like each IEP would say, their time with non-disabled peers.
Thank you.
Very much, Julie. That takes us to 7:30, the closing of this roundtable. Thank you all so much for participating. To the Family Communications Committee members that were here, appreciate your time. To the parents and family members that have come to share your feedback, we appreciate you. And to our special education department, thank you so much for being willing to share some of this information tonight and to listen. And just everyone have a good evening. Please keep your eye out. We will have another roundtable discussion in 2 months. The committee will determine what that is going to be, but we're going to do our best to make sure that we are getting it out into the community because we love having this opportunity to interact with all of you. All right. Have a good night, everyone.
Off your time.
Thank you. Take care, everyone.